Says that Rashi's commentary is systematic and based upon a group of roles or klalim. And I want you to think for a moment, what does that mean to you? What does that role say? If someone wants to elaborate or explain what that role means, and I'd like to give you a minute to think about that. Yankel, I see you raised your hand.
Yeah, he points things out upon he always uses the same ways to point things out and ask questions.
Okay, he uses the same thing. Does anybody want to elaborate on what Yankel just said there? He uses the same approach every single time. Does anybody want to say anything additional to Yankel? Ari?
The simplistic approach, which children can learn from.
Rashi would use the simplistic approach. That would be one of those rules. But before we get to the specific rules, focus more on there are a group of rules that Rashi uses in explaining the Chumash. Anybody else want to say anything further on that? Okay, so now the question for the Talmidim, if you can take out a pen and a paper, and for 2 minutes think to yourself, if you are familiar with any of those klolim, any of those rules of Rashi. If you're familiar with any of those rules, write them down. Everybody take out a pen and a paper. Yes, sir.
What does that mean by rules?
Well, we had a definition here moments ago from Yankel that Rashi approaches every pasuk chumash with a certain rules or way in which he interprets the psukim. It's not just arbitrary or random. There's a very specific way in which he approaches it. There are certain rules. Arala alluded to one of them, which would be that Rashi interprets things according to pshat, the most simplistic way. That means you may have another commentary that explains it which way, Yona?
Prat, or whatever it's called.
Rashi is pshat, and another commentary is using another approach. What approach would he possibly be using, explaining? What other ways are there besides pshat?
A detailed, deep explanation.
Okay, deep, okay. Yona? No, befrat wouldn't be one? Remez would be an additional type of approach. Rashi's pshat, the simplistic interpretation. Does anybody know of any other rules of Rashi? Spend a moment, think about Rashi, and think if over the years you've learned any other rules that Rashi uses in his interpretation of Chumash. You know what? Why don't we now spend a minute as groups. Turn to your pair, to your partner, and why don't you brainstorm ideas of possible klolim that Rashi uses. Okay, one more minute. Okay, bring your chairs back to their front position. Ruben, I noticed you raised your hand before. Yosef, did you have an idea, Ruben, to share with us?
He says the simple answer first, and then he says the medrash.
Okay, so Ruvain is proposing that Rashi will say the simplest pshat first, and then maybe he'll follow up with a midrash. And would midrash not be simple, Ruvain? Midrash would not be. That would be drush, according to what you're saying? Okay, we'll talk a little bit more about that later. Does anybody else have anything additional? Chesky.
He explains something like a question and answer form. He asks on it and then answers.
Let's talk a little bit more about that. Does Rashi generally pose the question in the Rashi? Does he pose the question? In most situations. He starts off like Teves you learned. How does Teves generally start off? How does Teves generally start off? What would be a general way that Teves starts? Which words would he use to tell you that he's asking a question? Tema or what is the most famous? Well, you have Hechadam is not well. No, the im taimar would be the primary way that Teves introduces the question. Does Rashi generally start with questions?
No.
So Yankel, what you want to elaborate on that? What does Rashi generally do?
He usually gives an answer, and then sometimes, most of the time he gives an answer, and it depends on you to figure out